The minute Vivian Harmon saw the receipt for champagne tucked in the glove compartment, she knew. She just knew. For weeks, she had been battling this knot in her stomach every time Marvin announced he was heading to their country house for maintenance work. 9 years of marriage had taught her things about a person, the rhythms of their habits, the patterns of their lies. This wasn't the Marvin she married, the man who once couldn't tell a hammer from a wrench and who complained about the long drive to their little sanctuary in the countryside. Suddenly, he had become passionate about property upkeep and weekend carpentry. It didn't add up, and neither did the champagne receipt from a gourmet shop 30 miles from their house, but just 5 from their country cottage. "You're being paranoid, Vivian," he had told her the previous night when she questioned why he needed to leave so early on Friday. "Seriously, you're looking for reasons to scratch an itch that isn't there." His dismissive tone cut through her like a knife, leaving her doubting herself as he so often managed to do lately. Vivian stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror the next morning. Her blue eyes, usually bright and confident, looked back at her with uncertainty. At 39, her brunette hair still fell in gentle waves around her face, framing features that her students often said made her look younger than her years. She taught literature at Westbrook High School, where she'd been inspiring teenagers to love classic novels for over 15 years. How ironic that she, who prided herself on analyzing character motivations and plot twists in fiction, couldn't decipher what was happening in her own marriage. The champagne receipt wasn't the first clue. There had been mysterious phone calls that Marvin would take in another room, always speaking in hushed tones. New cologne she didn't recognize, late nights at the office that his accounting firm supposedly required. And then there was the sudden interest in their country house, a charming 2-bedroom cottage with a stone fireplace that they had purchased 5 years ago as a weekend retreat. For the first 4 years, Marvin had visited it reluctantly, claiming the isolation bored him. Now, he couldn't seem to get there fast enough. "Something's not right," Vivian whispered to herself, clutching the edge of the sink. "And I'm going to find out what it is." That Friday morning, Vivian called in sick to work, something she rarely did. Her department head didn't question it. Vivian had accumulated so many unused sick days that the school practically owed her a sabbatical. She waited until Marvin left for work, kissing her on the cheek with what felt like obligatory affection before heading out the door with his overnight bag. He had told her he'd go straight to the country house from his office, as he had been doing for the past 6 weekends. But this time, Vivian would be watching. She waited 30 minutes to ensure he was truly gone before springing into action. She threw a few essentials into her own overnight bag, a change of clothes, her phone charger, and a pair of binoculars she'd borrowed from the science department at school. Then she called the one person she knew she could trust with anything. "Brianna, it's me. I need your help," she said, the moment her friend answered. Brianna Lewis had been Vivian's closest friend since they'd both started teaching at Westbrook 15 years ago. As the school's biology teacher, Brianna approached everything with scientific precision and analytical thinking. She was also fiercely loyal. "What's wrong? You sound terrible." Brianna's concern was evident even through the phone. "I think Marvin's cheating on me, and today I'm going to prove it." There was silence on the other end of the line for a moment. "You know I never liked him," Brianna finally said. "What's the plan?" 30 minutes later, Brianna arrived at Vivian's house in her practical sedan, dressed in dark clothes as if prepared for a stakeout. Her curly hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and her expression was grim but determined. "You really think he's going to meet someone at your country house?" she asked, as Vivian climbed into the passenger seat. "I'm almost certain of it," Vivian replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "He's been going there every weekend for the past 2 months, claiming he's doing maintenance. But Marvin barely knows which end of a screwdriver to hold. And there's this." She pulled out the champagne receipt from her purse. "I found this in his car. Vintage champagne, strawberries, and expensive cheese. Marvin hates cheese." Brianna studied the receipt with narrowed eyes. That bastard. I need to see it with my own eyes, Vivian said quietly. If I confront him without proof, he'll just tell me I'm imagining things again. He'll make me feel crazy, like he always does. The drive to the country house took just over an hour. Vivian directed Brianna to park on a service road about a quarter-mile from the property. From there, they would approach on foot through the woods that bordered the back of the house. Vivian knew every inch of those woods. She often walked there when they visited, enjoying the solitude and natural beauty, while Marvin stayed inside watching sports on the satellite TV they'd installed. "We need to be careful," Vivian warned as they made their way through the trees. "There's a clearing behind the house where we can see into the living room and kitchen without being spotted." The late September air was crisp, leaves crunching beneath their feet as they walked. Vivian felt her heart hammering against her ribs. Part of her desperately hoped she was wrong, that they would find Marvin alone, perhaps actually fixing something for once. But the larger part of her knew. She just knew. They reached the edge of the clearing and crouched behind a large oak tree. The country house stood about 50 yards away, a picturesque cottage with stone walls and large windows. Vivian had decorated it herself, spending weekends painting the walls in warm, earthy tones and selecting rustic furniture that complemented the woodland setting. She had poured her heart into making it a peaceful retreat from their busy lives. "His car's there," Brianna whispered, pointing to Marvin's silver sedan parked in the gravel driveway. "And he's not alone." Vivian's voice caught in her throat as she spotted a sleek red convertible parked beside it, a car she had never seen before. They waited, watching the house for any sign of movement. Minutes stretched into an hour. Just as Vivian's legs were beginning to cramp from crouching, the back door opened. Marvin stepped out onto the small deck they had built together 3 summers ago. He was carrying 2 glasses of wine, and he wasn't alone. A young woman followed him outside, tall, blonde, and wearing a dress that clung to every curve of her body. She looked to be in her late 20s, at least a decade younger than Vivian. As Marvin handed her a glass, she leaned in and kissed him with familiar ease, the kind that comes from an established relationship, not a first encounter. Vivian felt as though someone had punched her in the stomach. Her suspicions had been correct, but seeing it with her own eyes was devastating in a way she hadn't fully anticipated. She watched as Marvin wrapped his arm around the woman's waist, pulling her close as they sipped their wine and gazed out at the very woods where Vivian and Brianna were hiding. "That son of a bitch!" Brianna hissed beside her. Vivian couldn't speak. She just stared, absorbing every detail of the betrayal playing out before her. The way the woman's hand rested on Marvin's chest, the intimate smile they shared, the casual comfort between them that suggested this was far from their first rendezvous. When they went back inside, Vivian finally let out the breath she'd been holding. Tears streamed down her face, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage. "Now, I know," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Now, I have my proof." "What are you going to do?" Brianna asked, squeezing her friend's shoulder. Vivian wiped her tears with the back of her hand and stood up straight. "I'm going to make him regret every lie he's ever told me." She turned to look at her friend, a new determination hardening her features. "And I'm going to need your help." As they made their way back through the woods, a plan was already forming in Vivian's mind. Marvin had been gaslighting her for months, making her believe she was paranoid, that she was looking for reasons to scratch an itch that isn't there. Well, she was about to give him an itch he would never forget. "You know," Brianna said thoughtfully as they reached the car, "as a biology teacher, I have access to some interesting specimens." Vivian looked at her friend, raising an eyebrow. "What kind of specimens?" A slow smile spread across Brianna's face. "The kind that bite." For the first time that day, Vivian smiled too. By the time they reached the main road, their plan was taking shape, a plan that would ensure Marvin and his young mistress would get exactly what they deserved. "He thinks I'm crazy for looking for reasons to scratch," Vivian said, as they drove away from the country house. "I'll give him something to scratch about." The weekend passed in a blur of emotions for Vivian. She spent Saturday in a daze, alternating between overwhelming grief and white-hot anger. Sunday brought clarity and resolve as she and Brianna refined their plan over cups of strong coffee at Vivian's kitchen table. By Monday morning, when she returned to her classroom at Westbrook High, she had compartmentalized her pain enough to face her students with the same enthusiasm she always showed for Hemingway and Fitzgerald. "Miss Harmon, are you okay?" asked Emma, a perceptive senior who sat in the front row after class had ended. Vivian looked up from the papers she was organizing. "Of course. Why do you ask? You seem different today. Like you're smiling, but you're not really here." For a moment, Vivian considered sharing her burden, then quickly dismissed the thought. "Just planning something special," she replied with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Sometimes the best literature is the one we write ourselves." Emma nodded, clearly not entirely convinced, but respectful enough not to pry further. As the girl left, Vivian's phone buzzed with a text from Brianna. "Lab's empty after school. Collected the special ingredients. Meet me at 4:30. When the final bell rang, Vivian found herself walking with purpose toward the science wing. The hallways emptied quickly as students rushed to after-school activities or headed home. Brianna was waiting in her classroom, the door locked behind Vivian as she entered. "You're sure about this?" Brianna asked, her eyes serious despite the excited flush in her cheeks. Vivian nodded without hesitation. "Absolutely sure." "What did you bring?" Brianna reached under her desk and pulled out a plastic container with tiny holes punched in the lid. "These little guys are called Cymex lectularius," she said, placing it on the desk between them. "Better known as bedbugs." Vivian peered into the container. Inside were dozens of small, flat, reddish-brown insects crawling over one another. "They're harmless in terms of disease transmission," Brianna explained, slipping into her teacher voice. "But their bites cause intense itching. Most people develop red, swollen spots that can last for days. Some people have more severe reactions." "And they multiply quickly?" Vivian asked, recalling bits of information from nature documentaries. "Exponentially. The females can lay hundreds of eggs in their lifetime, and they're extremely difficult to get rid of once they establish themselves. Hotels spend thousands of dollars eradicating them when they have an infestation." A slow smile spread across Vivian's face. "Perfect. That's not all," Brianna continued, reaching for a second container. This one was larger and more solidly built. "I also brought these." She opened the lid just enough for Vivian to see dozens of tiny jumping insects. Pulex irritans, human fleas. They're even more aggressive biters, and they move faster. Between the two species, your husband and his girlfriend won't get a moment's peace. "And you mentioned something about the water supply?" Vivian prompted. Brianna's eyes gleamed with mischievous intelligence as she pulled a bottle from her bag. "Hydrogen peroxide. Highly concentrated. It won't harm anyone if they drink it in such diluted quantities once it's in the water tank, but if they shower in it," she trailed off with a meaningful look. "Their hair will turn orange," Vivian finished, remembering their conversation from yesterday. "Exactly. And since it's clear and odorless, they'll never know until it's too late. It reacts with the proteins in hair, breaking down the natural pigment. Blonde hair turns orange-yellow. Darker hair goes brassy orange. It's not permanent, but it takes weeks to fade." Vivian imagined Marvin and his young mistress with bright orange hair, scratching desperately at bites they couldn't escape. The image brought her first genuine smile since discovering the affair. "When does Marvin usually go to the cottage?" Brianna asked, carefully returning the insects to her bag. "He leaves Thursday evening after work," Vivian replied, claims he likes to wake up there on Friday morning to get an early start on projects. She couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. "Then we go Wednesday night," Brianna decided. "That gives us plenty of time to set everything up without risk of running into them." Wednesday evening came more quickly than Vivian had anticipated. She had maintained a facade of normalcy around Marvin, who remained oblivious to her discovery. He continued his pattern of distracted affection and vague excuses, which now felt like daggers to her heart rather than causes for suspicion. Each dismissive comment and casual lie only strengthened her resolve. "I have a late faculty meeting tomorrow," she told him Wednesday morning as he rushed through breakfast. "Budget discussions for next semester." "Don't wait up," he replied, without looking up from his phone. "I've got a dinner with clients." The ease with which he lied made her stomach turn. "I won't," she assured him, her voice steady, despite the anger churning inside her. That evening, she met Brianna at a coffee shop halfway between their homes. Her friend arrived with a backpack and a determined expression. "I brought everything we need," Brianna said as they walked to her car. "I also picked up some tiny cameras. They're battery-powered and connect to your phone. We can place them strategically to document the results." Vivian raised an eyebrow. "Cameras? Isn't that crossing a line?" "We're not putting them in private areas," Brianna clarified quickly. "Just in the living room and kitchen, so you can see their reactions when they realize what's happening. Besides, they're in your house. You have every right to know what's going on there." The drive to the country house was quiet, each woman lost in her thoughts. The night was cloudy, with no moon to illuminate their approach. They parked a quarter-mile away, as they had done before, and approached through the woods with flashlights guiding their way. The cottage stood dark and empty, its windows like blind eyes staring into the night. Vivian's hand trembled slightly as she inserted her key into the back door lock. This place had once been her sanctuary, filled with happy memories and peaceful weekends. Now it felt tainted, corrupted by betrayal. "Let's do this quickly," she whispered as they stepped inside. They worked with efficient precision, each woman focused on her assigned tasks. Brianna headed for the bedroom, carrying the containers of insects, while Vivian made her way outside to the water tank. The concentrated hydrogen peroxide needed to be poured directly into the main supply to ensure it would flow through all the taps and the shower. As she unscrewed the access panel on the tank, Vivian paused for a moment, considering what she was about to do. Was this too much? Was she overreacting? Then she remembered the way Marvin had looked at that blonde woman, the casual intimacy they had shared on the deck that she and Marvin had built together. She remembered all the times he had dismissed her concerns, made her doubt her own intuition, called her paranoid. Her resolve hardened as she poured the entire bottle into the tank. Back inside, she found Brianna carefully placing one of the small cameras on a bookshelf in the living room, angled to capture the entire seating area and the entrance to the kitchen. "How's it going in the bedroom?" Vivian asked. "Operation Infestation is complete," Brianna replied with grim satisfaction. "I put the bed bugs in the mattress seams and the fleas in the carpet and rug. They'll start making themselves at home immediately. By tomorrow night, when your husband and his girlfriend arrive, they'll have a welcoming committee ready." Vivian nodded, a complex mix of emotions swirling within her. "There's one more thing I want to do." She went to Marvin's side of the closet, where he kept spare clothes for their weekends at the cottage. One by one, she removed them all, leaving only the hangers behind. She did the same with the extra toiletries he stored in the bathroom cabinet. "No clean clothes, no toothbrush, no deodorant," she explained to Brianna, who watched with approval. Let's see how romantic their weekend is when he has nothing to change into after their infested night. "And here's my contribution to that effort," Brianna said, pulling a small spray bottle from her backpack. "Flea attractant, used by researchers to collect specimens in the field. I'm going to spray it on whatever clothes he brings with him." They finished setting up the cameras, one in the living room, one in the kitchen, and one aimed at the bathroom door to capture anyone entering or exiting. All were carefully hidden among decorative items or bookshelves, invisible unless someone was specifically looking for them. As they prepared to leave, Vivian took one last look around the cottage that had once brought her so much joy. Part of her felt a pang of sadness for what she was about to destroy. Not just the weekend retreat, but the last vestiges of her marriage. Second thoughts? Brianna asked softly, reading her expression. Vivian squared her shoulders. No, he destroyed this place the moment he brought her here. I'm just making sure he never forgets it. They left as quietly as they had arrived, locking the door behind them and disappearing into the darkness of the woods. The cameras were already transmitting to an app on Vivian's phone, showing the empty, peaceful rooms that would soon become anything but. What will you do when he comes home on Sunday? Brianna asked as they drove back toward the city. After all this? Vivian stared out the window at the passing trees, their shapes blurring in the darkness. I'm not sure yet. Part of me wants to confront him immediately. Another part wants to let him suffer through the work week, wondering when the bites will stop, trying to explain his orange hair to his colleagues. You could wait until he's desperate enough to ask for your help, Brianna suggested. Make him admit what he's been doing. Maybe, Vivian mused, or maybe I'll just have divorce papers waiting for him. Signed, with a little note explaining exactly why his hair matches his new convertible driving girlfriend's. They shared a grim laugh, but beneath the satisfaction of revenge, Vivian felt a hollowness opening inside her. 9 years of marriage were ending in an eruption of betrayal and retribution. There would be time for grief later, she knew, but for now, she clung to her anger like a shield, protecting her from the pain that waited just beyond it. When Brianna dropped her off at home, Vivian checked her phone one last time before going inside. The cameras showed 3 silent, empty rooms, waiting like traps for their unsuspecting victims. Sleep well, Marvin, she whispered to the dark house before her. Enjoy your last peaceful night for a very long time. Thursday crawled by with excruciating slowness. Vivian moved through her teaching day on autopilot, her thoughts constantly drifting to the cottage and what would unfold there tomorrow. Between classes, she checked the camera feeds on her phone, watching the empty rooms with anticipation building in her chest. The insects were invisible to the cameras, but she knew they were there, multiplying, waiting. Marvin called around noon, his voice casual and unconcerned. Just checking in. How's your day going? Fine, she replied, keeping her tone neutral despite the bitter taste in her mouth. Busy with midterm preparations. I'll be working late tonight, he said. Big client presentation tomorrow morning. Then I'll head straight to the cottage afterward. You sure you don't want to join me this weekend? The fall colors are probably at their peak. The audacity of his invitation made her grip the phone tighter. He was inviting her to the very place where he planned to meet his mistress, confident that she would decline as she had for the past several weekends. His arrogance was breathtaking. I can't, she said, swallowing her rage. Too much work to do, but you enjoy yourself. Your loss, he replied, and she could hear the relief poorly disguised as disappointment. I'll see you Sunday evening, then. I'll be waiting, she promised, and it wasn't entirely a lie. After school, Brianna appeared at her classroom door, eyes bright with conspiratorial excitement. Any updates? Vivian shook her head. Nothing yet. He's still planning to go tomorrow after work. And the blonde? Brianna asked, closing the door behind her to ensure privacy. No idea when she's arriving, but the cameras will let us know. They spent the evening at Vivian's house, ordering takeout and finalizing the next phase of their plan. Marvin texted around 7 to say he'd be home late, and not to wait up. Vivian watched the cottage cameras obsessively, half afraid that he might change his routine and go there tonight instead. What if he discovers the cameras? She asked Brianna, voicing one of her many anxieties. He won't, Brianna assured her. They're too well hidden, and he'd have to be specifically looking for them. Besides, if he's anything like most men, he never notices new decorative items anyway. Vivian managed a small laugh at that. It was true. She had rearranged their living room furniture 3 times in the past year, and Marvin had never commented once. What if the bugs don't bite enough? She worried next. What if they don't notice? Trust me, Brianna said with confidence born from years of scientific study. They'll notice. Fleas and bed bugs are aggressive feeders. especially when introduced to a new environment with fresh hosts. By Saturday morning, they'll be itching like they've got poison ivy all over. At midnight, Marvin still hadn't come home. Vivian checked her phone and saw a text from him sent 20 minutes earlier. Crashed at Dave's place. Too tired to drive home. See you Sunday. Dave was his supposed best friend from the accounting firm, a convenient excuse Marvin had used several times before. Vivian wondered if Dave even existed, or if he was just another fabrication in the elaborate web of lies her husband had constructed. He's not coming home tonight, she told Brianna, showing her the text. Claims he's staying at a friend's. Brianna snorted. Right, a friend, with blonde hair and a red convertible, I bet. Actually, I don't think so, Vivian mused, checking the cottage cameras again. The place is still empty. Maybe he really is staying with a colleague, getting his story straight for tomorrow. Brianna yawned and stretched. I should head home. Big day tomorrow. I've got the junior biology finals to proctor. After Brianna left, Vivian found herself alone in the house that suddenly felt too large, too empty. She wandered from room to room, seeing evidence of Marvin everywhere. His favorite coffee mug in the kitchen cabinet, his reading glasses on the side table, his slippers by the bed. 9 years of shared life surrounded her, and yet the man she had married felt like a stranger now. She slept fitfully, checking the camera feeds whenever she woke. By morning, the cottage remained undisturbed. She dressed for work mechanically, packing extra clothes in a small bag. After school, she would go to Brianna's house for the weekend. She couldn't bear to be alone in this house, surrounded by reminders of her failing marriage, while watching her revenge unfold. Friday dragged even more slowly than Thursday had. Her students noticed her distraction, but she blamed it on an approaching headache. Between every class, she checked her phone. During her lunch break, she sat alone in her classroom, staring at the 3 camera feeds showing the still empty cottage. Nothing yet? Brianna asked, poking her head in around 2 o'clock. Vivian shook her head. He said he'd go straight from work. Should be there by 6 at the latest. When the final bell rang, Vivian gathered her things with nervous energy. She and Brianna had agreed to meet at Brianna's house after school to monitor the cameras together. As she was about to leave, her phone vibrated with an alert from the camera app. Her heart leaped into her throat as she opened it. The living room camera showed movement. Marvin entering, carrying his overnight bag, and what looked like a grocery bag. He moved through the frame with the comfortable familiarity of someone in their own space, disappearing into the kitchen and returning moments later with a glass of water. It's starting, she texted Brianna, her fingers trembling slightly as she typed. 20 minutes later, she arrived at Brianna's cozy bungalow on the other side of town. Her friend greeted her with a glass of wine and an expectant expression. Has she shown up yet? Brianna asked, leading Vivian to the living room where her laptop was open on the coffee table. Not yet. Just Marvin so far, Vivian replied, settling onto the couch. He's unpacking groceries and opening wine to breathe. They watched together as Marvin moved around the cottage, oblivious to the microscopic predators beginning to sense his presence. He showered, using the hydrogen peroxide-infused water without any awareness of what it would do to his dark hair. He changed into fresh clothes, which would soon be contaminated by the fleas Brianna had released into the carpet. He made the bed with clean sheets, directly over the mattress seams now harboring bedbugs. He's setting the perfect romantic scene, Brianna observed with dark amusement. Flowers, wine, scented candles, all for a woman who isn't his wife, Vivian added, the pain still fresh despite her determination to focus on her revenge. At 5:45, the cottage's front door opened again. The blonde woman from the previous weekend entered, carrying a small designer overnight bag and wearing a form-fitting dress that made Vivian's stomach clench with instinctive comparison. She looked young, carefree, and completely untroubled by the fact that she was entering another woman's home to be with another woman's husband. That's her, Vivian said unnecessarily, her voice tight. Tiffany. How do you know her name? Brianna asked. I don't. I just decided that's what she looks like. A Tiffany. They watched as Marvin greeted her with a passionate kiss, taking her bag and leading her further into the cottage. The couple moved through the living room, glasses of wine in hand, talking and laughing with easy intimacy that cut Vivian to the core. "I can't believe he brought her to our special place," she whispered, the pain momentarily overtaking her anger. "We built that deck together. I picked out every piece of furniture, every painting on those walls." Brianna squeezed her hand in silent support. For the next hour, they observed as Marvin and Tiffany ate dinner, drank wine, and behaved as if they had every right to be there. They couldn't hear the conversation. The cameras only provided video, but the body language told them everything they needed to know. The casual touches, the lingering looks, the comfortable way they occupied the space together suggested this was far from their first rendezvous. "Wait for it," Brianna murmured as Tiffany excused herself and headed toward the bathroom. "She's going to wash her hands or freshen up, and that hydrogen peroxide will start working." Sure enough, when Tiffany returned to the living room a few minutes later, she seemed unchanged, unaware of the chemical reaction beginning in her blonde tresses. The couple continued their evening, moving to the couch where they cuddled close, sharing kisses that grew increasingly passionate. "I can't watch this part," Vivian said, turning away as Marvin led Tiffany toward the bedroom. The bedroom itself had no camera. They had drawn that line in their plan, but Vivian could imagine all too clearly what would happen there. "Let's give them some privacy," Brianna agreed, closing the laptop. "The real show won't start until later anyway." They ordered pizza and tried to distract themselves with a movie. But Vivian's thoughts kept returning to the cottage. Around 11 o'clock, he couldn't resist checking the feeds again. The living room and kitchen were dark and empty. The bathroom camera showed no movement. "They're in bed," she said, a complex mixture of emotions washing over her. "Sleeping in our bed, where the bed bugs are waiting." "Those bugs are nocturnal feeders," Brianna reminded her, with grim satisfaction. "They're most active between 2 and 5 in the morning. By sunrise, our guests should be feeling their presence quite distinctly." Vivian tried to sleep in Brianna's guest room that night, but rest eluded her. Around 2:30 in the morning, she gave in to her obsessive need to check the cameras. The cottage remained dark, but as she watched, a light came on in the hallway. Moments later, Tiffany appeared in the bathroom camera feed, looking sleepy and disheveled as she entered to use the facilities. When she emerged a minute later, Vivian gasped. Even in the grainy night vision mode of the camera, she could see that Tiffany's once golden blonde hair now had a distinctly brassy orange tint. The hydrogen peroxide had begun its work. Vivian was too excited to sleep after that. She kept checking the feeds every 30 minutes, watching for further developments. Around 4:15, activity erupted in the cottage. Lights came on in the living room, and Marvin appeared, scratching furiously at his arms and neck. He paced back and forth, his movements agitated and confused. Tiffany joined him shortly after, also scratching and looking increasingly distressed. Vivian unmuted the laptop, allowing the camera's audio to come through. The sound was faint and slightly delayed, but she could make out fragments of their conversation. "Itching like crazy. Something bit me. Look at my arms. Mosquitoes? In October?" She watched with vindictive satisfaction as they examined each other's skin in the living room light, finding the telltale red welts of insect bites beginning to form. Marvin went to the kitchen and returned with a bottle of water, which he gulped down nervously. "Do you have any anti-itch cream?" Tiffany asked, her voice coming through the speakers with surprising clarity. "I don't think so," Marvin replied, scratching his neck. "Maybe in the bathroom cabinet?" They disappeared from the living room camera's view, presumably heading to the bathroom to search for relief. Vivian switched to that feed just in time to see Tiffany standing before the mirror, her expression morphing from discomfort to horror. "My hair!" she shrieked, loud enough to peak the camera's audio. "Marvin, what the hell is happening to my hair?" Marvin joined her at the mirror, and his reaction was equally dramatic. His normally dark brown hair was now a patchy orange-red, the color distribution uneven and alarming. "What the— How is this possible?" he stammered, running his hands through his discolored hair in disbelief. Vivian couldn't contain her laughter any longer. She rushed to Brianna's room, throwing open the door without knocking. "Brianna, wake up! It's happening!" Her friend bolted upright, momentarily confused before understanding dawned on her face. She scrambled out of bed and followed Vivian back to the guest room, where the laptop showed the unfolding chaos. Marvin and Tiffany had returned to the living room, both scratching frantically and examining their bizarrely colored hair with growing panic. Their romantic weekend was deteriorating rapidly into a nightmare of itching and cosmetic disaster. "This place is infested with something," Tiffany was saying, her voice rising with hysteria. "And what's in the water? Look at my hair! It's ruined!" "I don't understand," Marvin kept repeating, alternating between scratching his arms and staring in disbelief at a strand of orange hair he held before his eyes. "This doesn't make any sense." "I can't stay here," Tiffany declared, scratching vigorously at her thighs through her silk pajama pants. "I'm leaving. Now. It's 5 in the morning," Marvin protested weakly. "I don't care. I'm covered in bites, my hair is orange, and this place is obviously toxic." They watched as the couple's argument escalated, with Tiffany storming toward the bedroom to collect her things, and Marvin following, pleading for calm and rationality. When they reappeared in the living room minutes later, Tiffany was fully dressed and heading for the door, her orange-tinged blonde hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail. "I'll call you when I get home," she snapped at Marvin, who stood helplessly in the living room, still in his pajamas, and scratching absently at his neck. "After I see a dermatologist and a hairstylist." The front door slammed behind her, and Marvin sank onto the couch, his expression a portrait of confusion and distress. He looked directly at the camera without seeing it, scratching his arms and shaking his head in bewilderment. Vivian and Brianna exchanged looks of triumphant satisfaction as the sound of Tiffany's convertible engine roared to life outside the cottage. "Phase 1 complete," Brianna said with a grin. "The mistress has fled the scene. Now, let's see how Marvin handles a weekend alone with the welcoming committee we left him," Vivian replied, feeling a surge of vindication warm her chest. After weeks of being made to feel paranoid and irrational, watching her husband's carefully constructed deception crumble filled her with savage joy. On the screen, Marvin was examining the couch cushions and carpet, searching for the source of his torment. He was about to discover that his problems were just beginning, and that the itch he had accused his wife of imagining was now very, very real. By 7:30 Saturday morning, Marvin's situation had deteriorated significantly. Vivian and Brianna watched through bleary eyes, having slept only in short stretches between checking the camera feeds. Their exhaustion was well worth the entertainment value of witnessing Marvin's growing desperation. He had searched every inch of the living room and kitchen, looking for evidence of whatever was causing the relentless itching. His hair had continued to transform overnight, now a vibrant shade of copper orange that would have been comical in any other context. The bites on his arms, neck, and legs had multiplied, forming angry red constellations across his skin. "Look at him trying to figure it out," Brianna said, passing Vivian a cup of fresh coffee. They had relocated to Brianna's dining room table, the laptop open between them. "He hasn't connected the dots yet." On screen, Marvin was on his hands and knees, peering under the couch with his phone's flashlight. His scratching had become almost mechanical now, one hand constantly working at some part of his body, while the other conducted his fruitless investigation. "Should we turn up the volume?" Brianna suggested. "I want to hear what he's saying to himself." Vivian increased the audio, and Marvin's mutterings became audible. "Can't be bed bugs. We never have guests here. Must be some kind of mites or— Damn it, this itching is unbearable." He disappeared from view, and they switched to the bathroom camera feed just in time to see him entering, scratching frantically at his back. He turned on the shower and stripped off his t-shirt, revealing dozens of red welts across his shoulders and chest. "Oh my God," Brianna whispered, unable to contain her schadenfreude. "He's covered in bites." "And he's about to make his hair even worse," Vivian added, as Marvin stepped into the shower, unaware that the water would only accelerate the chemical reaction with his already orange hair. They watched the bathroom door, waiting for him to emerge. When he did, 15 minutes later, they gasped in unison. Marvin's hair had brightened to an almost neon orange, the color unnaturally vivid against his reddened, irritated skin. "It's like his head is on fire," Brianna observed, fighting back laughter. "I almost feel sorry for him," Vivian said, but her tone suggested otherwise. "Almost." Marvin returned to the bedroom, presumably to dress, then reappeared in the living room camera view a few minutes later, fully clothed and on his phone. They turned up the volume to hear his side of the conversation. "Don't know what's happening, Dave. The place is infested with something. Tiffany left at dawn, completely freaked out. Her hair turned orange overnight, and mine too. We're covered in bites." A pause as he listened to the person on the other end. "No, I'm not joking. It's like something out of a horror movie. I've checked every inch of this place and can't find the source." "What?" "No. Vivian doesn't know I'm here with... she knows I'm at the cottage, but not about... Look, that's not important right now. I need to figure out what's happening here." Another pause. "I can't call an exterminator on a Saturday morning. And how would I explain the hair thing? Something's wrong with the water, too. No, I don't think it's a sign from the universe or whatever new age crap you're into these days. Fine. Laugh all you want. I'm living a nightmare here." He hung up, tossing the phone onto the couch with obvious frustration. Then he resumed his search of the cottage, moving with increasing agitation as the itching apparently intensified. "I wonder if he's checked the mattress yet," Brianna mused. "That's where most of the bed bugs are concentrated." As if hearing her suggestion, Marvin returned to the bedroom. They couldn't see him there, but his exclamation of disgust and horror moments later told them he'd finally found evidence of the infestation. "Oh God, the mattress seams are full of them." He reappeared in the living room, his face pale beneath the splotchy red bites. "This is a nightmare," he muttered to himself, scratching his neck compulsively. "I need to get out of here." They watched as he began gathering his things, throwing items haphazardly into his overnight bag. His movements were frantic, interrupted constantly by scratching. When he went to collect his toiletries from the bathroom, they heard another cry of frustration. "Where are all my clothes? I had extras in the closet." Vivian smiled with grim satisfaction. "Looking for something, dear?" Marvin returned to the living room with his partially packed bag, then stopped abruptly. For the first time, a look of suspicion rather than confusion crossed his face. He slowly turned in a circle, examining the room with new awareness. "This doesn't make any sense," he said quietly. "Bedbugs don't appear overnight in this quantity. And what could turn our hair orange? Unless..." Vivian and Brianna exchanged concerned glances as they watched Marvin's expression change from bewilderment to dawning comprehension. "Vivian," he said her name so softly they almost didn't hear it. Could she know? Could she have done this? He began to move around the room with new purpose, examining decorative items and bookshelves, the very places where they had hidden the cameras. "Oh no," Brianna whispered. "He's looking for cameras." Vivian watched, heart pounding, as her husband methodically searched the room. He paused at the bookshelf where the living room camera was concealed among decorative items. "There's no way he'll find it," Brianna assured her. "We hid them too well." But Marvin was more observant than they had given him credit for. He reached out and picked up the small decorative box containing the camera, turning it over in his hands with narrowed eyes. "This wasn't here before," he murmured. "Vivian redecorated months ago and got rid of all these little tchotchkes she used to collect." Vivian's stomach dropped. "I forgot he might notice that." On screen, Marvin examined the box more closely, eventually discovering the tiny lens. His expression hardened from suspicion to certainty. "She knows," he said, staring directly into the camera. "She knows everything." "Time to cut the feed," Brianna said urgently. "He's figured it out." But Vivian couldn't look away. There was something compelling about watching the moment her husband realized his betrayal had been discovered and punished. Marvin set the camera down and continued his search, quickly finding the one in the kitchen as well. The bathroom camera remained undiscovered for now, but it hardly mattered. He knew he was being watched. Instead of the anger Vivian had expected, Marvin's face showed resignation and, surprisingly, a hint of respect. He returned to the living room and sat on the couch, scratching his arm absently as he stared at the camera he'd discovered. "Well played, Vivian," he said, his voice clear through the speakers. "I underestimated you. The bugs, the hair dye in the water, it's almost admirable in its thoroughness." He ran a hand through his bright orange hair and laughed without humor. "I deserve this, I suppose. But did you have to include Tiffany in your revenge? She's not the one who betrayed you." Vivian snorted at that. "She knew you were married. She came to our second home. She's not innocent." On screen, Marvin continued his one-sided conversation with the camera. "I'm guessing you followed me last weekend. Saw us together." He sighed heavily. "I should have been more careful. Should have realized you were too smart to fool for long." He scratched his neck again, wincing at the intensity of the itching. "So what now, Vivian? What's the end game here? Because I'm assuming this," he gestured to his hair and the bites covering his visible skin, "is just the beginning." Vivian and Brianna exchanged glances. This wasn't how they had expected him to react. The calm resignation, the lack of outrage or denial. It was unsettling. "He's trying to manipulate you," Brianna said firmly. "Don't fall for it." Vivian nodded, but something in Marvin's defeated posture tugged at her. 9 years of marriage hadn't disappeared overnight, despite his betrayal. On screen, Marvin stood up, still addressing the camera. "I'm leaving now, going to a hotel to figure out how to deal with all of this." He gestured to his orange hair and bite-covered skin. "But this conversation isn't over, Vivian. We need to talk, really talk, when I get back." He gathered his partially packed bag and headed for the door, then paused for one final message. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not just for getting caught, but for everything. You deserved better." The front door closed behind him, and moments later they heard the sound of his car starting and driving away. The cottage fell silent, empty, except for the thousands of tiny insects continuing their work, unaware that their human hosts had fled. Vivian closed the laptop slowly, processing what she had just witnessed. "That didn't go quite how I expected." "What were you expecting?" Brianna asked, refilling their coffee cups. "Rage, denial. Not whatever that was." She rubbed her temples, feeling the beginnings of a headache. "He almost seemed relieved that I found out." "Classic cheater behavior," Brianna said dismissively. "Once they're caught, they act like getting it off their chest is some kind of noble unburdening. Don't buy it for a second." "I don't," Vivian assured her, but doubt had crept into her voice. "It's just strange to see him so accepting of the consequences." They spent the rest of the morning monitoring the bathroom camera, the only one Marvin hadn't discovered, but the cottage remained empty. Around noon, Vivian's phone buzzed with a text from her husband. "I know you're watching. I'm at the Lakeview Hotel trying to explain to the staff why I look like this. We need to talk. On your terms, whenever you're ready. I won't come home until you say it's okay." "Are you going to respond?" Brianna asked, reading the message over Vivian's shoulder. Vivian set the phone down without replying. "Not yet. Let him stew for a while." But as Saturday progressed into evening, a new emotion began to creep in alongside Vivian's righteous anger: emptiness. The initial rush of vindication had faded, leaving behind a hollow space where her marriage had been. Revenge, it seemed, was not as fulfilling as she had hoped. "What are you thinking about?" Brianna asked, noticing her friend's distant expression as they prepared dinner. "What comes next?" Vivian admitted. "The revenge was satisfying in the moment, but it doesn't change anything. He still cheated. Our marriage is still over." Brianna set down the salad tongs and faced her friend. "Are you sure about that? About it being over?" Vivian looked up in surprise. "You're the one who's been saying all along that I should leave him, that he doesn't deserve forgiveness, and I still believe that," Brianna replied carefully. "But it's not my decision to make. Only you know what you can live with, what you can forgive." They ate dinner in thoughtful silence, the question hanging between them. After they cleaned up, Vivian checked her phone again. 3 more texts from Marvin had arrived. "The hotel doctor says the bites are from both bedbugs and fleas. Quite the combination. He gave me antihistamines and calamine lotion. My hair is still getting brighter. The front desk clerk couldn't stop staring. I miss you. Not just today, but for months now. I've been a fool." Vivian set the phone down without responding, but saved the texts. Evidence, she told herself, though of what she wasn't entirely sure. That night, she lay awake in Brianna's guest room, staring at the ceiling and replaying the events of the past few days in her mind. The satisfaction of her revenge was undeniable, but it came with an unexpected cost. It forced her to accept that her marriage was irrevocably changed. Whether she chose to end it or attempt to rebuild, nothing would ever be the same. Sunday morning brought a new text from Marvin. "Tiffany called. She wants nothing more to do with me. Can't say I blame her. My poor judgment ruined 2 relationships." Vivian read it twice, trying to decipher if he was fishing for sympathy or genuinely reflecting on his actions. It was impossible to tell through the impersonal medium of text messages. "What are you going to do?" Brianna asked over breakfast, watching Vivian check her phone for the 10th time. "I don't know yet," Vivian admitted. "Part of me wants to make him suffer longer. Another part just wants to get it over with. Confront him, file for divorce, move on with my life. Whatever you decide, I'm here for you," Brianna assured her, squeezing her hand across the table. "Just don't rush into anything while you're still processing." Around midday, a new text arrived that made Vivian's breath catch. "I'm checking out of the hotel. Need to know if I should come home or find somewhere else to stay. Your call." This required a response. After 9 years together, she at least owed him the courtesy of clear communication about what happened next. With trembling fingers, she typed, "Come home at 6. We need to talk." His reply was immediate. "I'll be there. See thit." As evening approached, Vivian gathered her things from Brianna's house, preparing to return home for the confrontation that awaited her. "Are you sure you don't want me to come with you?" Brianna offered, concern evident in her voice. "I can stay in another room. Just be there for moral support." Vivian shook her head. "This is something I need to do alone, but thank you for everything." They embraced at the door, and Brianna held her friend at arm's length, studying her face. "Remember how strong you are. Whatever he says, whatever excuses or explanations he offers, trust your instincts. They've been right all along." The drive home felt surreal, as if Vivian were watching herself from a distance. The tree-lined streets of their suburban neighborhood looked exactly as they had when she left on Friday, yet everything had changed. She was no longer the woman who had driven away 2 days ago, confused and hurt, but still clinging to the possibility that she might be wrong about her husband's betrayal. Now she knew the truth, had seen it with her own eyes, and there was no going back to blissful ignorance. She arrived home at 5:30, giving herself time to settle in before Marvin arrived. The house felt both familiar and strange, filled with evidence of their shared life together. Photos from happier times lined the hallway. His coffee cup sat unwashed in the sink from Thursday morning. His slippers remained by his side of the bed, waiting for feet that might never fill them again. Vivian moved through the rooms, mentally cataloging what was hers, what was his, what they had chosen together. The practical side of her mind was already dividing their possessions, preparing for the separation that seemed inevitable. Yet another part of her, a part she was reluctant to acknowledge, wondered if there might be another path forward, one that required more courage than walking away. At precisely 6 o'clock, she heard a car pull into the driveway. Footsteps approached the front door, followed by the sound of a key in the lock. Vivian sat in the living room, back straight, hands folded in her lap, waiting to face the man who had betrayed her, and the uncertain future that lay ahead. Marvin hesitated in the doorway, his silhouette framed by the fading evening light behind him. Vivian sat perfectly still, taking in the sight of her husband. His hair remained a shocking shade of orange, though slightly muted from what she had seen on the camera feeds. Red welts dotted his neck and forearms, some covered with dabs of pink calamine lotion that made him look almost clownish. He carried no bags, having clearly understood that this meeting would determine whether he still had a home here. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice uncharacteristically tentative. "It's still your house, legally speaking," Vivian replied, her tone carefully neutral. He stepped inside, closing the door softly behind him. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other across the room, 9 years of history hanging in the air between them. "You look terrible," she finally said, allowing a hint of satisfaction to color her words. "I feel terrible," he admitted, unconsciously scratching his wrist before catching himself and stopping. In more ways than one. The silence stretched between them again, neither quite ready to begin the conversation that would determine their future. "Your hair is very vibrant," Vivian observed, breaking the tension. Marvin ran a self-conscious hand through his bright orange locks. "The hotel concierge recommended a salon that might be able to fix it. They can't see me until Wednesday." He paused, then added, "Though I'm thinking of keeping it this way for a while, as a reminder." "A reminder of what?" "Of what happens when I underestimate you." The corner of his mouth twitched in what might have been the ghost of admiration. The hydrogen peroxide in the water tank was ingenious. And the bugs. "I'm guessing your friend Brianna helped with that part?" Vivian didn't confirm or deny, but her expression told him he was right. "May I sit?" he asked, gesturing to the armchair across from her position on the couch. She nodded once, maintaining her composed facade despite the storm of emotions within her. As he lowered himself gingerly into the chair, wincing slightly from the discomfort of his bites, she noticed how diminished he seemed. The confident, sometimes arrogant man she had married appeared humbled, uncertain. "I'm not going to insult you by asking how you found out," Marvin began, meeting her gaze directly. "Or by denying anything. You obviously know about Tiffany." "I know you've been taking her to our country house for at least 2 months," Vivian confirmed, her voice steady despite the pain that saying the words aloud still caused. "I know you've been lying to me every weekend, claiming to be doing maintenance work when you were actually entertaining your girlfriend." Marvin flinched at her choice of words but didn't contradict her. "What I don't know," she continued, "is why. After 9 years, why her? Why now? Was it something I did? Something I didn't do?" "No," he said quickly, leaning forward. "Vivian, no. It was nothing you did or didn't do. It was me. My weakness. My stupidity." She raised an eyebrow skeptically. "That's a convenient explanation. It's not you, it's me. Straight from the cheater's handbook. I deserve that," he acknowledged. "But it's still the truth. Tiffany works in the marketing department at our firm. We started talking at office happy hours, then messaging about work. Then," he trailed off, aware that the details would only cause more pain. "Then you decided that your marriage vows were optional," Vivian finished for him. "That our life together meant so little you could risk it for someone you barely know." Marvin looked down at his hands. "I know there's nothing I can say to justify what I did. I'm not even trying to. I just want you to understand that it wasn't about you or about us, really. It was about me feeling, I don't know, seen in a different way, appreciated for things that had nothing to do with our history together. And you couldn't have talked to me about feeling unappreciated? We had to get to this? She gestured between them, encompassing the wreckage of their relationship. I should have, he admitted, but it was easier not to. Easier to pretend everything was fine here while seeking validation elsewhere. Cowardly, I know. Vivian stood suddenly, unable to remain still with the emotions coursing through her. She walked to the window, looking out at their quiet neighborhood as evening descended. Behind her, she heard Marvin shift in his chair, but remain seated, respecting her need for space. When I suspected you were cheating, she said without turning around, you made me feel crazy. You told me I was looking for reasons to scratch an itch that wasn't there. Do you remember saying that? I do, he said quietly. It was cruel and calculated. I was trying to make you doubt yourself so you wouldn't pursue your suspicions. His honesty, now that he had nothing left to hide, was almost more infuriating than his lies had been. Vivian turned to face him again. I followed you last weekend, she told him. Brianna and I watched from the woods as you and Tiffany had your romantic evening on the deck I helped you build. Marvin closed his eyes briefly, absorbing this new information. I'm sorry you had to see that. I needed to see it, Vivian countered. Otherwise, you would have kept gaslighting me, making me question my own instincts. You're right. He scratched absently at a bite on his neck. I was manipulating you, and it was wrong. Despicable, really. His admission hung in the air between them. In all the scenarios Vivian had imagined for this confrontation, she hadn't anticipated this level of straightforward acknowledgement. She had expected denials, minimizations, attempts to shift blame, not this quiet acceptance of responsibility. Why did you take her to our cottage? She asked, returning to the question that had haunted her most. Of all places, why there? Marvin sighed heavily. The practical answer is that it was convenient and private. No one would see us there. No chance of running into colleagues or friends. He paused, then continued with reluctant honesty. But the deeper truth is probably more psychological. Some part of me was, I don't know, reclaiming the space. You loved that cottage so much more than I did. It was always more yours than mine, in my mind. So you corrupted it, Vivian said, the realization dawning on her. You took something that was special to me and tainted it with your affair. I didn't think of it that way consciously, he admitted, but you're probably right. There was an element of rebellion in it, I suppose, which makes it even worse, I know. Vivian felt a fresh wave of anger at this revelation. The cottage had been her sanctuary, her retreat from the pressures of teaching and daily life, and he had deliberately violated that space, bringing his mistress into the heart of what she held dear. The bedbugs and fleas were fitting then, she said with bitter satisfaction, considering how you infested our marriage. Marvin didn't flinch from the metaphor. I can't argue with that. They lapsed into silence again, the weight of their broken covenant pressing down on them both. Outside, a neighbor's porch light flickered on, casting long shadows across their living room. So what happens now? Marvin finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. It was the question Vivian had been asking herself for days, and she still didn't have a clear answer. Part of her wanted to throw him out immediately, to begin divorce proceedings and excise him from her life like the cancer he had become in their relationship. Another part, smaller but persistent, wondered if there might be something worth salvaging in the ashes of their marriage. I don't know yet, she admitted. Right now, I can barely stand to look at you. He nodded, accepting this. I understand. Do you want me to leave? Find somewhere else to stay while you decide? Yes, she said after a moment's consideration. I need space to think without you here, reminding me of everything that's happened. Okay, he agreed quietly. I can get a long-term room at the hotel, or stay with my brother if he'll have me. Take what you need for a few weeks, Vivian instructed. And Marvin, don't come back to the cottage. I'm having it professionally fumigated on Tuesday, but I don't want you there again. Ever. He looked pained but nodded his acceptance. It's yours. I'll sign it over to you entirely in the divorce, if that's what you decide." The word divorce hung in the air between them, neither confirming nor denying that this was the inevitable conclusion to their story. "Is there anything I can do?" he asked after another stretch of silence. "Anything at all that might help?" Vivian considered the question seriously. "You can give me honesty. Complete honesty. How long has this really been going on? Was Tiffany the first? Are there others I don't know about?" Marvin met her gaze steadily. "Tiffany and I have been seeing each other for 4 months, not just the 2 months you knew about. She is the only one. There have been no other affairs during our marriage." "And is it over between you? Really over?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. "It ended when she left the cottage yesterday morning. She made it very clear she wants nothing to do with me after what happened. Not that it matters. I wouldn't continue it even if she wanted to. This whole experience has been clarifying." "Clarifying how?" Vivian pressed, needing to understand. Marvin considered his answer carefully. "It made me see what I was risking, what I was throwing away. Not just our marriage, but my integrity, my self-respect." He gestured to his orange hair and bite-covered skin. "Your revenge was fitting in more ways than you probably intended. It made the outside of me as ugly as my actions had made the inside." Despite herself, Vivian felt a flicker of something that might have been compassion. She quickly suppressed it. It was too soon for forgiveness, too raw for empathy. "I'll pack some things," Marvin said, recognizing that their conversation had reached its natural conclusion for now. "Should I check in with you? Or wait for you to contact me? I'll let you know when I'm ready to talk again." Vivian decided. It might be a while. He nodded and rose from the chair, moving toward their bedroom to collect what he would need for an extended absence. Vivian remained in the living room, listening to the sounds of drawers opening and closing, hangers sliding across the closet rod. The familiar domestic noises now carried the weight of impending separation. 20 minutes later, Marvin emerged with a large suitcase and his laptop bag. He paused by the front door, looking back at Vivian with an expression of profound regret. "For what it's worth," he said softly, "these last few days, as miserable as they've been physically, have made me realize how much I still love you, how much I always have. I know that probably means nothing right now, and I don't expect it to change anything, but it's the truth." Before Vivian could respond, he was gone, the door closing quietly behind him. She listened to his car start in the driveway, the sound of tires on gravel fading as he drove away. And then she was alone, truly alone, for the first time since discovering his betrayal. The house felt different immediately, emptier, but somehow less suffocating. She moved through the rooms slowly, touching familiar objects that now seemed to belong to another life. In their bedroom, the closet door stood ajar, Marvin's side noticeably depleted. On his nightstand, he had left his wedding ring, a small gold circle that had once symbolized their unbroken commitment. Vivian picked it up, feeling its weight in her palm. 9 years of promises, condensed into a simple band of metal. She thought about throwing it away, or selling it, or even burying it in the garden as a symbolic funeral for their marriage. Instead, she placed it in her jewelry box, closing the lid on it for now. Some decisions didn't need to be made immediately. She called Brianna, who answered on the first ring. "How did it go?" her friend asked anxiously. "He's gone," Vivian said simply. "Moved out, at least temporarily." "And? How do you feel?" It was a complicated question. Relieved, sad, angry still, but less intensely. Mostly thoughtful. Thoughtful? About what? Vivian sank onto the edge of her bed, considering. About forgiveness. Not for his sake, but for mine. About whether some broken things can be mended, and whether they should be. "Are you saying you might take him back?" Brianna sounded alarmed. "I'm not saying anything definitive yet," Vivian clarified. "Just that I need time to figure out what I want the next chapter of my life to look like, whether he's in it or not." They spoke a while longer, Brianna offering support without judgment, for which Vivian was grateful. After they hung up, she found herself drawn to the spare bedroom where she kept her collection of classic literature, the books she taught her students, the stories that had shaped her understanding of human nature and resilience. Her fingers trailed across the spines until they stopped at The Winter's Tale by Shakespeare, one of the problem plays, with its themes of jealousy, betrayal, and ultimately forgiveness and reconciliation. She pulled it from the shelf, remembering how she had always found the ending both beautiful and troubling. Was forgiveness, after such a profound betrayal, truly possible? Or was it merely a convenient, dramatic device? In the weeks that followed, Vivian rebuilt her life one day at a time. She reclaimed the cottage, hiring not only exterminators, but also painters and new furniture, transforming it into a space that was entirely her own. She reconnected with friends she had neglected, joined a book club, started taking long walks in the early mornings before school. Marvin kept his distance as promised, communicating only through occasional text messages, asking if she needed anything practical. She rarely responded, but appreciated that he respected her boundaries. The divorce papers remained undrawn, neither of them quite ready to take that irrevocable step. 3 months after that confrontation in their living room, Vivian finally felt ready to see him again. His hair had returned to its natural color, she noted when he arrived at the neutral ground of a coffee shop she had chosen. The bite marks had healed, leaving no visible scars. But something in his eyes had changed permanently, a gravity that hadn't been there before, an awareness of consequences. "Thank you for meeting me," he said, as they sat across from each other, coffees steaming between them. "I'm still figuring things out," she warned him. "This isn't a reconciliation." "I understand," he assured her. "I'm just grateful for the chance to talk." They spoke for 2 hours, more honestly than they had in years, about what had gone wrong in their marriage long before the affair, about the patterns of communication that had failed them, about the people they had become, and whether those people could or should find a way forward together. No decisions were made that day, or in the immediate days that followed, but a door that had seemed permanently closed now stood slightly ajar, allowing for the possibility of a different kind of future than either had imagined in the aftermath of betrayal. 6 months after the country house incident, as they had come to call it, Vivian invited Marvin to dinner at their house. Her house now, as she had come to think of it. They had been meeting regularly, sometimes with a marriage counselor present, working through the wreckage of what had been destroyed and assessing what might be salvageable. "I've been thinking about what you said," she told him, as they sat on the patio after dinner, watching the sunset, "about how my revenge made the outside of you match what you felt about the inside." He nodded, waiting for her to continue. "I think that's why it was so satisfying in a way. It made the invisible visible. Your betrayal, your lies, they were things I couldn't see directly. But then, suddenly, they were right there, impossible to ignore or deny." She sipped her wine thoughtfully. "It forced both of us to confront the truth." "It did," he agreed. "Painfully, but necessarily. I'm not ready to make any permanent decisions yet," Vivian said carefully, "but I am ready to say that I'm open to the possibility of forgiveness. Not forgetting, I'll never forget, but perhaps forgiving, eventually." Marvin's eyes filled with unexpected tears. "That's more than I deserve, and more than I expected. It's not for you," she clarified. "It's for me. Carrying this anger forever would only hurt me in the end." He reached across the space between them, his hand extended, but not presuming to take hers. After a moment's hesitation, Vivian placed her fingers lightly against his. It wasn't a promise or a recommitment, not yet, but it was an acknowledgement that some things broken might, with sufficient time and care and honest effort, be mended into something new, perhaps even something stronger at the wounded places. And as the day's last light gilded the edges of the world around them, Vivian found herself remembering a line from one of her beloved books. "What's past is prologue. Their story wasn't over yet, merely turning to a new chapter, one they would write together or separately, but with eyes wide open to both the shadows and the light. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And drop a comment below. What city are you watching from? And if your heart tells you to, feel free to leave me a tip on Buy Me a Coffee. Just check the first pinned comment. Thanks for keeping me company and for the coffee, and I'll see you in the next story.